Yesterday you talked about the relationship between power and morality and how NATO has the opportunity to manage those two to produce good effects. How do you think that NATO is handling power and morality now?
Yeah, you see, the the question of power is very much what people think of when they think of NATO, because they see a military alliance and they see the United States, the world's largest military power,
Yeah.
right in there. And at the same time, NATO, from the very beginning, right after World War II, had these Western liberal democracies come together to think about how can we coordinate our foreign policy and our defense policy in order to have not just individual countries protect themselves, but together to have a security regime, a security area which stands for, and NATO put it in there in its preamble in the Washington Treaty, which stands for the principles of liberty, freedom, market-based economies. And I see NATO as a real opportunity. And it's a challenge. Every time the member states have to think carefully, have to talk to each other very, very carefully. What does a particular crisis mean for us? What are the actions that we ought to take, if any, that are just, that are right? And how do we take them? How do we take just action? Take, for example, Afghanistan, a very difficult, sensitive case, but the United States had essentially given the Taliban regime this ultimatum to hand over Osama bin Laden, and the Taliban leadership decided not to do so, so military action took place. There was a lot of damage. The Americans bombed a lot. At that point in time, the Western world could have said, okay, goodbye, we're going home, we're done. But really, they took a much more difficult route. They said, why don't we go in and try to help the people of Afghanistan with a combination of military, economic, and human rights and political tools to try to organize a better structure for their society. Now, I'm not saying it succeeded, I'm not saying it's a wonderful success, I'm just saying NATO tried to do the right thing. Right now, in Europe, there is worries about Russia. What will Russia really want to do? How much does it think about it ought to take back from the Cold War era? And people look to NATO. Is there a way in which you can protect us without provoking the Russians, without starting a third world war? You see, and that is where Canada fits in, and I think it's very logical that Canada is a founding member of NATO, because we, in World War I and in World War II, we identified our security and defense with the people of Western Europe. Essentially, in the first place, the British and French peoples from which we came. And then as the United States became more and more powerful, we realized we wanted to help the United States organize its power well in the world. So the Canadians, the British, and the Americans essentially sat down after they had a direct Polish request for help to create this Atlantic Alliance. And if you look at it through all of its 65 years of history, Canada has continued to see this alliance as its prime vehicle to help the world. Today that really means, because security challenges are so much more difficult than they were even 30, 40 years ago, today that means you would like to seek a UN Security Council mandate for a broadly supported action. Then you'd like to look at what is the most effective military vehicle to implement this mandate, and it's almost always NATO. And in NATO, Canada has the ability to work with the Americans, but also with the Brits and the French, and smaller allies like the Dutch and the Danes. So for us it is really the best way, the most effective way to project our values in military and security policy, and to work with other countries so that we can amplify our small capabilities. What choices do we have? Very few outside of NATO. We are too small a nation to go and do things on our own, and we need like-minded allies. The United Nations is not such a strong vehicle for military action. NATO is exactly the right vehicle. So NATO is our Canadian opportunity, our best multiplier. And I see Canada staying in this alliance as far as I can see the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.